Welcome to the Innovator Cafe, a podcast that bridges the gap between people and the world of AI and innovation. Follow us to explore the top AI applications, eco insights, and the emerging trends. Today, we're honored to have Ray Wu, managing partner of Alumni Ventures with over 20 years of investing experience, focusing on AI, Web3, FinTech and SaaS investment. Welcome, Ray. Can you give us a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Ray Wu, I'm based in Silicon Valley. I've been here for more than 20 years. My background, I was a technology major. So I'm an electrical engineer, and my first job was doing compilers on mainframes, so that shows the age. So I've been kind of in the tech industry for a long time. I used to be an operator, had my own companies. Then over the years kind of becomes more into the corporate. So I was in the corporate ventures. I was doing investment merger acquisition for Cisco. I ran HP Venture for 4 years. Then I did a bunch of cross-border funds between Asia and the US. When globalization makes sense. Then COVID happens, decide to switch back to the US and build on top of Alumni Ventures. So currently I run the AI fund, the blockchain fund, and several school funds on top of Alumni Ventures. And it's a big platform. So we have 850,000 community members, over 20 universities. So all the famous one you can think about, Stanford, Harvard, MIT, Yale, Berkeley of the world. We're very active in the space. We do a few hundred, maybe 200 to 300 deals on a yearly basis as a group. PitchBook rank us almost probably the top 3, if not number 1 for the last few years. And we have over 1,400 portfolio companies. So we do help a lot from essentially a network perspective to our investment. So both from the resource perspective, where we connect with a lot of colleges, universities in terms of hirings, in terms of just advisors, board members, as well as connecting with our portfolios. We have a CEO service team, which is really great in terms of connecting CEO with our CEO. So we bring a lot of network together to our investment. So I've been doing this for quite a while, and it's great to be here.
Thank you, Ray. Sounds like you have a lot of great experience, right? Can you tell us about the story of your transition into the venture capital and corporate capital profession from consulting and maybe Cisco executive role? How did you break into the executive role and investor roles in your career path?
Mine is a little bit by accident. So obviously, as I mentioned, I was a technologist. But I always interested in the business side. So I had my own company. I was doing a bunch of consulting, and essentially that leads to almost a lot of traveling. So I was traveling heavily when I was building up Cisco's consulting business in Asia Pacific. So I used to do 250,000 miles a year. So really on the airplane, probably better than my house. Then I got married, so it doesn't make sense. Then just settled down. And at that moment, Cisco is looking for someone who understands the software, who understands the business, who can essentially combine these together and look at both from an investment and acquisition perspective. So I got into the corporate ventures through that. Then over the years, just started to build out investing in lots of companies. So that was purely a little bit by accident, but also I think I always enjoy investment because I love innovation. I love technology. I love to help strong entrepreneurs to win in this game. So that's always an exciting journey for me.
So I know a lot of people, they come to the venture side, right? But stay here for a few years and then they move back to the technology or sales role, right? But you stay here for over 20 years. What makes you to stay in this industry so long and make it very well?
I think this is one of the most exciting place when you see good, interesting things happen, right? So you can always develop technology. Obviously, I don't code anymore. I used to code. Like I mentioned, my first job was doing compilers on C and C++. So I was a deep coder myself. Then over the years, it doesn't make sense. I tend to find there's lots of interesting technologies, but the best interesting thing is how to combine that with business and how to get disruptive technology to market. I think a lot of these are just combining technology with finance, with business models, with the right people to make it happen. So that's essentially a venture capital business. So because of that, I just think it's very interesting and very fulfilling as well when the investment works out, when you see the success of the founders. And it's always great to see something that disrupted the existing business models and could completely create something new out of scratch.
That's very nice. So you've been in the corporate venture role and the VC role, right? Both of them. What's the difference from your perspective?
Good question. Corporate tend to be more strategic. You think about that, right? So when corporate invests, they don't just want financial returns. They also want strategic linkage. So in many ways, we basically look at where does it fit from a business perspective. And normally corporate don't lead the investment, they're co-investors. So they tend to look at not from a purely financial returns. So from that, you will see some of the difference in financial structures, in some linkage. Normally corporate investors need to require a business unit sponsorship. So internally, they want to see if there's any linkage with the current business. Is there something that from a business can help the ventures? And also there's a lot of kind of information rights, right? The first refusal, look at potentially invest the acquired company. There's a lot of other kind of strategic linkage to that. Versus VC is very financial driven. For us, we want to see the best outcome for the investment. So there's not truly a tie-in to strategic model. Sometimes that's kind of the reason why sometimes when we look at investment, we try to figure out if it's strategic or not. If it's strategic, if there's anything that could be very different from a structure perspective that prevent the company that partner with somebody else, maybe in the same industry. So there's a lot of these kind of nuances from an investment perspective. Happy to chat more if there's people who are interested in this kind of differences, because that's very different from a pure financial outcome perspective.
We know that you've been investing managing partner since 2003. Why did you decide to choose SaaS, Web3, FinTech, and AI as your focus area at each stage?
I think it's just looking for the disruptions, right? So I think a lot of these is coming down to venture. You make money not by things stay stable, but by things that's changing. The faster it changes, the more opportunity there are, right? So you look at this, every one of these goes through a transition period. I think SaaS, obviously, we have seen that before, that's pretty obvious. Let's just talk about AI, right? AI essentially is changing rapidly. It's one of the largest disruptors at the current moment. So from a beta play perspective, I just think there's a lot of changes because AI is coming, right? So that's, to me, the reason we choose Web3 is the same way. So Web3, you think about blockchain, it's about decentralization, which is not something that people think about. But then you think about technology over the years has always transitioned from a centralized to a decentralized model, right? So I mentioned my first one I started, I was a mainframe. So mainframe is centralized. Then PC is very decentralized. The internet server is centralized, mobile is decentralized. So there's always come from a centralized to decentralized world. So that's a disruption to a certain degree. When something that is not natural and disrupt the existing state, or there's potential opportunities around that, it becomes something exciting for me. It's not by design. I don't think it's just by design. It's just interesting as technology, is interesting as an asset class. So that's how I got into all these different fields.
That's good. So what is your investment philosophy?
Oh, I don't think there's a purely philosophy because we all grow over time. I just think, as I mentioned, I enjoy working with great founders. I enjoy seeing unique technology that wins. I enjoy looking at something can be possible and make the world a better place. So I think that's the driver behind it. But from a I don't think there's a strong philosophy behind it, because everything it comes down to is how we look at the world, how we actually make it a better place, right? So there's a lot of different ways we can contribute to that. And for me, it just happened to be, I think technology is a cool driver. You look at in the last 30 years, all the techs, 30 years ago, probably the biggest public companies, all utility companies, energy companies, real estate. Now you look at the market, right? It's all technology, or at least technology enabled. So I think fundamentally technologies is what's saving mankind from all these resources, a lot of the challenges we face. So that's something that I think as a trend will continue, and I love to support that trend.
So for the early stage investment, right, there's always a debating, do you need to look at the technology more, or do you want to look at the team more? Which side do you agree more?
The earlier it is, the more important the team is. The later, technology is always important, but I don't think that because the technology worldwide, I don't think it matters to a certain degree. If you just look at technology, for example, why would open source even have a place, right? It's not even protected. Then it comes down to is, can you build a model around it though? So I think there's a lot more other dimensions associated with it in addition to technology and team. But I do think the team matters more in the early stage because it shapes the company, it shapes the cultures, it shapes the way how the technology being developed, how it's being applied, with the customers. You really need to figure out where all this fits, right? It's just technology, it can be anything. It's a morphing product. What a team can do is morph it into something that fit into the market. And I do think that's the most important thing. So like I said earlier, the more team is important. Even in the later, I still don't think it's purely a technology because it's more about how you replicate that, right? So it's become operations, it becomes wrapping that into a business model. So a lot of people I think it's maybe, especially in Silicon Valley, we think so much about technology. I think it matters. It does have a differentiation. IP protection matters, but having that is not the unique edge it used to be. I think a lot of these is about how you utilize and combine technology with something special that was at this time. How do you go to market?
Can you please share with us one best deal you made and what challenges and doubts arise when investing in this company?
We invest so many companies, like I mentioned. As a group, we have 1,400 portfolio companies, and I personally have done probably 70 plus investment in the last 3 years. So it's very hard to bring out one. I don't want to, but it's hard to bring. We have done some, I can talk about one latest investment we did. We invest into a decentralized social network, a Twitter alternative called Blue Sky. So that was kind of towards later last year. The company grew from 5 million users when we look at them to 32 million within 4 months. So exponential growth, and the company has done very well. So from a financial perspective, so that's one example. But I don't think it makes sense to talk about a single company. But from a challenging perspective, I do think early stage company is, from a VC perspective, there's a lot of things that they need help, both from the people, HR perspective, connecting, finding the right people, to just essentially building out the ecosystem around it, right? Most people, when they have where it's become interesting as a platform, right? So how you build a platform around it, that just means ecosystem. So that takes a lot of energy from both from a strategy perspective to help the companies think through the strategy, but also where our community can help, where we can help, where our kind of ecosystem can help. A lot of these is coming down to is where the value we can add to the company.
I see. So back to the people topic, right? So what are the characteristics you normally look at it when you see a new founder?
Curious. So the founder is curious about learning things, but also not only, I think it depends on really what type of founder. If it's really disruptive, they tend to look at things a little bit different. That's how they can become disruptive, right? But also the question is that real or not? So you got to validate that. But from a founder perspective, I do think curiosity is very important. Somebody who's always looking for something new, want to understand why. I think a lot of these is not just, I have that experience, but experience does change over time. So it can be a good thing or a bad thing. But I do think experience, so we do look at for a certain domain product, especially in if there's a regulatory environment, compliance, certain areas, I do think experience matters. So we're looking at founder with that domain experience. If it's technical, we look at founders' degrees, where they have done, A lot of times also try to understand the founder motivation, why they do things, what bring them to develop something this, and also what unique thing they can bring to the table, right? And I do think the type of founders who can think about the long term is very important, to be able to not only think about the current moment, because that moment always change very fast. So I think the founders need to be willing to stick to they know the why behind it, why they're doing things. It's not, oh yeah, everybody else is doing this. This is very cool. Of course, it's very cool for now. It may not cool for long, but we see technology cycle changes. A lot of times, what they start with may not be where they end. So it does change over time. So the founder really need to be very adaptive, curious, persistent, have certain knowledge where they are willing to bring to the company, but also be willing to say, no, something has changed. Let me change something new and do something new around it. So I think that's very important as well.
So since you've been in this industry for a long time, what are the core differences between the AI wave this time and the last wave? How does this apply to the AI investment and products now?
Well, I don't know about last wave. So there are so many waves, but let's think about internet wave and mobile wave, right? So maybe if you think about big waves, maybe those are the two. Probably a PC wave before that. There's many different waves along the way. I think the difference between AI waves, there's a few differences. One is AI is about co-piloting with human. I think traditionally that all the technology wave has to be enable human to do more, right? So we continue to do more human leverage technology. So technology has always been a tool. It's not a partner. It's not a replacement of human. I think AI for the first time, there's potential to do that and becomes very much involved in the decision making, or at least become a truly partner in terms of decision making, and sometimes even take over majority of the work. So from that perspective, I think this is different from the previous wave. Second observation is that previous technology waves, the large company don't jump in right away. They tend to be very suspicious of this new wave, right? So you think about when Microsoft is doing PC, IBM think there's only a few thousand PC out there. So of course, let Microsoft have the market, right? So when Google doing the search, Yahoo think organization on a structure is the way to go because it's junks on the internet. Why would people search, right? So they all don't believe the new market. That's why there's opportunities for startups to build a barrier of entry. So now if we think back in this wave, I think all the big companies see it and they jump in with tremendous amount of funding and also their own innovation in terms of what they can bring. So this becomes a challenge for startups. So from that perspective, it is very different, right? So I think those probably the two big ones. There's a lot small ones we can talk about. Yeah.
When the internet starts, initially it's very expensive thing, right? But as more and more people start to use the internet, eventually now it's kind of like water, right? Yeah. Everyone use it and the cost reduce very dramatically once the user starts trend to be exponential growth, right? But for AI, because the AI models cost itself, do you foresee in the future AI can reduce the cost with more and more people start to use it?
I think it's already happening, right? So you look at DeepSeek, for example, it's already happening. It's not like the cost reduction is not happening. I think the reason it was so costly in the initial place is because it starts from ground zero. It's almost like DNA sequencing. It takes a long time, a lot of cost, right? So is the language model building. The first initial large language model does take a long time. It takes tremendous amount of computing power and data to make it happen. So that is a huge cost. And then when we continue to explore the large language model perspective, there's going to be more and more, but the foundation is already there. Now, I think it's the cost structure reduction is around the second order is how you apply it. So most people, when they look at, they're not going to take a large language model. They're going to take a small language model. They're going to take learning from a large language model, distill it, right, into a smaller language model. That's something applied to them. And then that training cost is much less than before. And I do think that's going to change quite a bit. Then from a computing power perspective, we're seeing that NVIDIA is keep on doubling its processing power, right? And reducing the cost, same cost structure, double the power, double the capability, right? If not more. And add a tremendous amount of pacing, right? Traditionally, it's 1 year, now it's half a year. So I don't think that's also the cost structure is going to change. Then it comes down to the power consumption, right? So then I do think electricity matters. That's kind of the reason US is going to the key is how to reduce the electricity energy cost. So whoever have the lower energy cost is going to do. So over time, I do think all the cost curve is going to shift downwards because more and more it become more efficient. And then AI is something that you can build around the similar type of model. You can always distill from others. So it's almost like you're learning from experts, right? So essentially it becomes learning from experts. Then I think that growth will reduce costs tremendously. So I actually not worried that much. I just think that the baseline of that is a sunk cost. The question is, how do they recoup that cost? But whoever build on top of that, I do think that's actually have a tremendous amount of opportunity because that cost structure is reducing very fast.
In the past wave, like a mobile wave or internet wave, right, we can see a lot of disruptive business models. For this AI wave, do you think there's some disruptive business model will come up? And did you see any so far?
I think disruptive business models really depends on how you define the business models. I do think the application may be different. So like I mentioned, the traditional way is empower humans. So you look at internet mobile wave is about global reach. It's about how you bring the human business, global scale, how to communicate better. That's the Cisco model I was in. How you actually sell more online, Amazon model, right? So essentially, I think that's the scaling model. Essentially, it's about human expansion, right? Human reach, human everything. So that's the globalization that brings all this. So it makes a lot of sense. I think AI wave is a little bit different. I think AI models is actually not about human by itself. I think AI is a unique class almost. So why I say that is because I think the type of impact AI is going to have is where humans are not at the core, or human is not visible to a certain degree. So then who's going to replace impact by AI? It's the one who's sitting in the warehouse lifting stuff, who's actually in the back end doing things. Nobody knows. They don't interact with anyone. So a lot of times they can be replaced by AI and nobody would know they were being replaced by AI. So that's one side to it, right? Second, the white collar workers for the first time is being impacted, right? Traditionally, it's always blue collar and people keep on moving higher to the knowledge cycle. This time, actually, I think the impact the most is white collar workers who are actually systematic to a certain degree the thing they do. And it's essentially the knowledge already captured by digital world, and that can be automated by AI very quickly. So that's why you see a lot of job losses around high-tech industry. And it's certain areas where there's a lot of human fee involved, right? Fee structure. So think about legal, think about accounting, think about all the expensive areas where humans charge a lot of money for the expertise. I think that would change quite a bit, right? So when to look at software as a service model before, right? So that was the internet, the software side. But then I think now moving, I call it service as software. So it's a reverse. It's almost like you can package a service, automate the service using AI. And even though a lot of times on the outside may look still like serving human, but back end, you can almost become automated to be AI's tools and engines. And you can scale a company probably into $1 billion without too many people for the first time because you have virtual humans working on the back end. So a lot of these, I think it's the waves, I think impact is about AIs replicating, almost become a virtual human being. And that's the one that actually can impact the business the most. So like as a previous wave is all about empowering human. This is actually, to a certain degree, unfortunately, it is about replacing human, at least replacing a lot of repetitive work to make it more efficient.
This reminded me, I just saw the news yesterday, right? Two AI, they work together and they find out they're both AI, then they get rid of human language. They just talk to each other by using the machine language, which is more efficient. Kind of funny.
I think that's where it's becoming interesting, right? You think about our brain as a processing at much higher bandwidth compared to what we speak, right? When you listen to podcasts, a lot of time you can do 2x and still be able to capture whatever they say, right? So some people play at higher speed. Our language is actually not that efficient communicating, and so a lot of times, why does a machine need to go through human language as a format, right? So like you mentioned in that example, once the machine detects another machine, they can communicate in the higher bandwidth language, in a binary mode, whatever, right? Shrink down the overall communication speed, speed up the communication, and shrink down the communication cost. I think that's very interesting. And then even you extend beyond that, let's say computer-human interface ever happens, right? A lot of that is actually becomes tap into our high bandwidth processing capability of the brain. Do we have to go through our language to communicate? Why can't we, our computer-human interface that bring that and then communicate with each other at much faster speed? There's a lot of things can be done and become very interesting how this world would change because of the technology. But I think we're bringing on a parallel co-pilot. I think it's a good name. It is a co-pilot to a certain degree. And how do we manage and work with that?
So from the charging model perspective, right? Did you say like in this wave, there's some new kind of charging model for AI startup company?
I think it's more traditionally always charge per seat. I don't know if that may even make sense anymore because human are going to be reduced. So if you charge per seat, maybe over time, you don't have a lot of human in the company. So how do you charge it? I think the usage model to a certain degree, we're actually doing more, just like when you buy in the token, right? So when you buy in the language, you actually pay in tokens. So I think a lot of usage model becomes very interesting from that perspective. I think it's a volume game. It's the utilization game. Is no longer a fixed structure and human-based. I think more and more on the back end, maybe that model would change. I just think almost efficiency-wise, it's like a lawyer. Do you actually billing by hours if it's not done by human? Does that even make sense, right? Because majority would be automated. The writing would be automated. A lot of things like the traditional how we measure human productivity is no longer applied here, right? So I think humans are moving into a new different waves of this technology. It's almost traditionally we're measured by our work, right? Essentially, you won't get paid until you work. So we are the only workers in a system. AI is for the first time, AI is a parallel worker. It's in addition to human, AI is working. So from that perspective, are you paying to do your work? Are you paying to be almost supervisor of various AI tools to do the work? If that's the case, then a lot of these kind of billing models also doesn't make sense anymore. So a lot of things because of that, I think there's extended ways we can think about where the business could be in the next 10 years because the human in the overall loop is that from a majority of the human workers to a hybrid human and AI combination.